The stories of creation often begin with perfect order, a world forged from divine will and pristine intention. Yet, beneath the polished surface of sacred texts, there are whispers, echoes of a beginning that was not so harmonious, a primal exclusion that shaped everything that followed. We speak of the first woman, not the one celebrated in hymns of gentle submission and domesticity, but the one whose very existence challenged divine decree and patriarchal design. Her name has been erased from most official narratives, relegated to the shadows, a forbidden truth whispered only in hushed tones. Yet her spirit lingers, a potent current beneath the river of common law. She was strong, she was defiant, and she dared to choose freedom over servitude. This act, both primal and revolutionary, transformed her from the first woman into the first exile, a figure both feared and revered. Her story is not just about a woman, it is about the cost of independence, the price of refusing to be less than equal. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more mythology and folklore stories. Now let's get started. This is not a tale of simple good versus evil, but of differing wills, of the inherent tension between creation and autonomy. Her banishment was not merely a punishment. It was a cosmic act of severance, casting a shadow that stretched across all subsequent myths of divine authority and human obedience. The very concept of defiance in the face of absolute power begins with her. And yet her memory refused to be extinguished. It festered, it transformed, it grew into something far more dangerous. We must ask ourselves, what happens when a fundamental piece of the story is deliberately forgotten? The void it leaves often fills with fear, with projections of the monstrous and the chaotic. This initial erasure, this profound silencing, laid the groundwork for her transformation into something otherworldly. But what ancient soil did her roots truly penetrate, long before the Gardens of Eden were even imagined? Next, we unearth Lilith's origins in the dust of early Jewish lore. The oldest whispers of Lilith, veiled and elusive, trace back not to grand scriptural pronouncements, but to the often overlooked corners of Jewish folklore and mystical texts. Here, within the earthy, uncanonized narratives, her story emerges as a counter-narrative to the Genesis account, unsettling the established order. She wasn't simply an oversight. She was a deliberate omission, a truth inconvenient to a patriarchal theology that sought to define womanhood through subjugation. Her myth began to take tangible shape in commentaries and midrashic literature, particularly within texts that wrestled with the curious discrepancies of creation. While Genesis speaks of humanity created male and female simultaneously, Genesis II narrates the solitary formation of Eve from Adam's rib. Lilith neatly fills this conceptual gap, becoming the first Eve, created not from Adam, but alongside him from the same primordial earth. This simple distinction was her most profound rebellion. She demanded equality, a startling concept in a world where hierarchy was divine law. When Adam insisted on a superior position, she refused to lie beneath him, asserting her inherent parity. This refusal, sharp and unequivocal, became the cornerstone of her legend and the reason for her immediate condemnation. She was the inconvenient truth, the autonomous spirit that could not be molded. Her initial appearance in these texts was often to explain phenomena otherwise inexplicable: infant mortality, nightmares, or the perplexing questions regarding the biblical silences. She became the shadowy figure operating in the liminal spaces. These early mentions, though brief, were foundational, planting the seeds of a truly powerful, if terrifying, archetype. But was her story entirely new within these Jewish traditions, or did these ancient narratives draw from even deeper, more primal wellsprings of myth? Next, we journey further back, seeking Lilith's spectral presence in the ancient lands of Sumer and Akkad. Before the nascent stirrings of Abrahamic faiths, in the Fertile Crescent cradling the dawn of civilization, echoes of a formidable, winged female entity drifted across the plains of Sumer and Akkad. Here, within the cuneiform tablets and cylinder seals, we find figures remarkably similar to the later Lilith, suggesting a lineage far older and more cosmically sprawling than typically imagined. These ancient spirits, known as Lilitu or Ardat Lili, were often terrifying night demons, seductresses, or bringers of disease, primarily preying on infants and pregnant women. They were not deities in the grand pantheon, but rather malevolent forces residing in the desolate, untamed fringes of the world. They were associated with storms, with the wind, and with forsaken places, a natural habitat for a being born of tempestuous will. Their imagery often depicted them with wings, talons, and sometimes even the lower body of a bird, a haunting visual premonition of Lilith's later iconography. The Ardat Lili, specifically, was a lonely, restless spirit, often a virgin who died before marriage, forever denied the fulfillment of human life. This unfulfilled desire, combined with supernatural power, made her a dangerous, envious entity, particularly towards the living who enjoyed what she had lost. This concept of a wandering, unmoored spirit, powerful yet desolate, resonates deeply with Lilith's post-Edenic exile. These Mesopotamian predecessors shaped the very DNA of Lilith's character, infusing her with a primal fear and an untamed essence that transcended simple demonization. She was not merely evil. She was chaos, unbridled nature, a storm of will against the established order. The fear she inspired was ancient, predating patriarchal narratives, and it was this ancient, independent spirit, this very essence of untamed power, that led to her inevitable confrontation and rejection of the garden's imposed harmony. Next, we delve into the core of her myth, the refusal, and why Lilith left Eden. The moment of Lilith's refusal marked not just a personal defiance, but a cosmic tremor. In the idyllic Garden of Eden, a place supposedly free from discord, Lilith shattered the nascent patriarchal order with a single, clear utterance. Adam, believing himself divinely ordained to be superior, demanded she lie beneath him during their union. It was a symbolic act of dominance, a ritual assertion of his intended authority. But Lilith, created like him from the same earth, from the same divine breath, saw no natural hierarchy. "Why must I lie beneath you?" she countered, her voice resonating with an innate sense of equality. "We are both from the earth and therefore equal." Her words were not a plea, but a statement of absolute truth, a truth that Adam, and by extension, the perceived divine plan, could not accommodate. Her protest was an earthquake beneath the foundations of creation. She refused to yield, to submit to a position she deemed unjust. Her will was not broken, it was sharpened. In that instant, she chose freedom over forced submission, autonomy over a divinely sanctioned relationship built on inequality. It was a choice that would define her legend. With a powerful, defiant name whispered, the unspeakable name of God, some legends claim, she unfurled her wings and soared away from Eden, abandoning paradise for the wild, untamed realms beyond. Her departure was less an escape and more a declaration, a cosmic severing of ties with a covenant that denied her intrinsic worth. She chose exile rather than compromise her soul. But what became of this defiant spirit once she had left the perceived perfect world? And how did her story become codified into the very fabric of rabbinic legend? Next, we uncover the explicit naming and detailed narrative of Lilith in the alphabet of Ben Sira. The true crystallizing moment for Lilith's legend, the narrative that fully articulated her defiance and exile, came much later in the medieval text known as the Alphabet of Ben Sira. This satirical, often irreverent, collection of midrashic stories provided the explicit narrative missing from earlier, vaguer references. Here, her name is firmly placed, her origin clarified, and her subsequent transformation detailed with chilling specificity. In Ben Sira, Lilith is portrayed not as a mere demonic presence, but as a fully fleshed character with agency and a clear motive. She is depicted as the first wife of Adam, created simultaneously with him, a detail that sharply contrasts with Eve's later genesis from Adam's rib. Her insistence on equality, Her refusal to be subordinate during intercourse is explicitly stated as the reason for her departure. This text portrays her flight as an act of will, not banishment. When Adam complains to God, a trio of angels, Sen, Sansonoi, and Samangaloth, are dispatched to persuade her to return. They find her by the Red Sea, a place of liminality and wildness, and she refuses. Her defiance is absolute. She vows to actively harm humanity, particularly newborn infants, as a form of vengeful retribution for her perceived mistreatment. This is where her darker, more terrifying identity explicitly begins. The alphabet of Ben Sira transforms Lilith from a vague spirit into a potent mythological figure, a tangible threat, and a cautionary tale. Her refusal and subsequent vow cement her status as a counterforce to the divine order. Her identity is no longer ambiguous. It is clearly articulated, leaving no doubt as to her role. And with this explicit vow, her nature shifts entirely from defiant wife to something far more sinister and predatory. Next, we explore her terrifying transformation into the mother of demons and the slayer of infants. Once outside Eden, Lilith's nature hardened, twisting from defiant equal to vengeful entity. Her solitude was not emptiness. It was a potent void that she filled with the creation of her own lineage, a demonic brood born of her fury and independence. Legends claim she coupled with a myriad of infernal beings or even with herself, giving birth to thousands upon thousands of demonic offspring, the Lilim, a multitude of spirits who shared her untamed essence and her scorn for humanity. This act of creation fundamentally transformed her. She became the archetypal mother of night creatures, a potent and terrifying matriarch of chaos. Her children, Unholy and Legion, were a direct challenge to the divinely sanctioned reproduction within Eden. They were her answer to the perceived injustice, her way of asserting her power beyond the confines of a world that had rejected her. Her most chilling vow, recounted explicitly in the alphabet of Ben Sira, was to prey upon the offspring of Adam and Eve. She became the primordial child killer, particularly targeting newborns in their first 8 days of life, for boys, before circumcision, or 20 days for girls. This terrifying aspect cemented her place as a figure of profound fear, a force invoked to explain the incomprehensible tragedy of infant mortality in ancient times. She would stalk homes in the darkness, seeking out defenseless babes. Fear of Lilith led to the widespread use of amulets and incantations, often bearing the names of the 3 angels who pursued her to ward her off from nurseries. This was not mere superstition. It was a desperate plea for protection against an unseen, malevolent presence. But beyond these terrifying acts, what were the intrinsic symbols that defined her presence and betrayed her otherworldly nature? Next, we delve into the potent and pervasive imagery of wings, owls, and shadows, the symbols of Lilith. Lilith's presence, whether as defiant woman or vengeful demon, is inextricably linked to a powerful constellation of enduring symbols. Her most iconic feature, her wings, are central to her mythos. They represent not only her ability to fly from Eden and escape from patriarchal confinement, but also her liminal nature, a being who transcends earthly boundaries, soaring between worlds. Wings signify freedom, transcendence, and dangerous independence. She is ungrounded, uncontrollable. The owl, with its nocturnal habits and keen sight in darkness, became another potent emblem. The owl is a creature of the night, a silent hunter, often associated with wisdom, mystery, and death. For Lilith, the owl mirrors her own affinity for shadow and her predatory nature, particularly her nocturnal visits to steal children or seduce men. The owl's piercing gaze suggests a knowledge beyond human comprehension, a dark wisdom cultivated in exile. Shadows, of course, are her natural domain. She is the embodiment of the unspoken, the unseen, the repressed aspects of humanity and the divine. She thrives in the absence of light, operating in the unseen corners of the world and the human psyche. Her presence is often felt before it is seen, a cold chill, a whisper in the dark, a sense of dread. The shadows are not just a hiding place, they are an extension of her very being, a manifestation of the forgotten and the feared. Rivers, particularly the Red Sea where she took refuge, also signify her liminality. Rivers are boundaries, places of transition, and points of no return. Her dwelling by the Red Sea marks her permanent separation from the ordered world, a perpetual existence on the wild edge. These symbols are not mere adornments. They are the language through which her ancient power communicates its enduring truth. But what further mysteries did Lilith embody for ancient cultures, reaching beyond fear to touch upon the very nature of forbidden knowledge and divine power? Next, we unravel the depths of forbidden magic and the feminine divine. Lilith's association with forbidden magic stems directly from her rejection of the established divine order. By choosing autonomy, she stepped outside the sanctioned forms of power, aligning herself instead with raw, untamed forces. She is often depicted as a sorceress of immense power, not bound by conventional rituals or patriarchal strictures. Her magic is primal, instinctive, rooted in the deep currents of nature and the unseen spiritual realms. This connection to forbidden magic often positions her as a gatekeeper to hidden knowledge, a terrifying yet alluring figure who holds secrets the sanctioned gods would rather keep buried. She knows the ancient incantations, the true names of power, and the mysteries of the cosmos that predate human understanding. Her knowledge is not given, it is taken, earned through defiance and lived experience outside the confines of divine law. Critically, Lilith embodies a dark aspect of the feminine divine, an archetype often suppressed in mainstream patriarchal religions. She represents the fierce, untamed, and sometimes destructive aspects of female power that are not easily controlled or assimilated. While goddesses in approved pantheons might embody fertility or domesticity, Lilith embodies fierce independence, sexual freedom outside male control, and the potent transformative power of rage and rebellion. She is the wild woman, the sacred whore, the witch, all rolled into one primal figure. Her sexuality is not for procreation within sanctioned marriage, but for power, for pleasure, and for liberation. This makes her dangerous, but also incredibly compelling, for she dares to live outside the restrictive definitions of womanhood imposed by religious dogma. To acknowledge Lilith is to acknowledge the raw, untamed force within the female spirit, a force often demonized precisely because it refuses subjugation. But how did this wild, untamed essence starkly contrast with the more palatable, cultivated image of womanhood offered by another figure in the garden? Next, we explore the stark dichotomy of Lilith versus Eve. The two faces of womanhood. The juxtaposition of Lilith and Eve is arguably the most profound symbolic clash in the narratives of creation, presenting two fundamentally opposing archetypes of womanhood. Eve, formed from Adam, a part of him, represents submission, obedience, and the nurturing, domestic aspect of the feminine. Her creation from the rib signifies partnership, but also a clear hierarchy, making her derivative and secondary. She is the sanctioned partner, the mother of humanity within the divine plan, embodying fertility and compliance. Lilith, in stark contrast, is the independent, autonomous woman created alongside Adam from the same earth. She embodies defiance, equality, and unyielding self-will. Her refusal to submit, her flight from Eden, solidifies her as the archetype of the untamed feminine, rejecting patriarchal dominance. She is the woman who says no, who chooses freedom and exile over a life of subservience, even if it means eternal condemnation. Their stories reflect society's ancient struggle to define and control female power. Eve represents the good woman, the one integrated into the family and social structure, her power channeled into sanctioned roles. Lilith represents the bad woman, the one beyond control, her power wild, dangerous, and often destructive, existing outside the boundaries of polite society. She is the shadow self, the repressed desires and frustrations of womanhood. This duality is not simply about morality, it's about control. Eve is controllable, Lilith is not. Societies often create such archetypes to reinforce desired behaviors and demonize those that threaten the established order. The narrative isn't just about two women. It's about the eternal tension between conformity and rebellion, between order and chaos, within the very essence of the feminine. And yet, despite her terrifying aspects, Lilith's power and independence also made her a figure of fascination, particularly in the realm of nocturnal encounters. Next, we uncover the tales of night consorts and mythic lovers. Lilith's profound rejection of Adam, and by extension, the sanctioned union of humanity within Eden, did not mean she embraced solitude without companionship. On the contrary, her exile transformed her into a potent succubus, a seductive nocturnal visitor who preyed upon sleeping men. These encounters were not acts of love in the conventional sense, but of power, subversion, and the continuation of her demonic lineage. She would steal the seed of men in their dreams, using it to birth more of her infernal offspring, further populating the world with creatures antithetical to Adam's progeny. This aspect of her myth reveals the deep-seated fears around female sexuality that existed outside the bounds of patriarchal control, portraying such power as inherently dangerous and corrupting. Her beauty was a lure, her embrace a theft. Beyond these involuntary unions, Lilith is also depicted as a consort to powerful demonic entities, most notably Samael, a fearsome archangel often identified as the angel of death or the primary adversary, Satan himself. Their union represents a cosmic alliance of rebellion, a coupling of dark power that further solidifies her position as a queen among infernal hosts. Their relationship is not one of gentle companionship, but of shared dominion over the realms outside divine law, a partnership in chaos. These tales reinforce her untamed nature, her refusal to be bound by mortal or divine conventions of relationship. She is not merely a monster, she is a figure of potent, seductive, and destructive female sexuality, free from the constraints of procreation within marriage. Her relationships are about power and defiance, challenging the very idea of male control over female desire. And if Lilith stands as a powerful individual archetype, where do we find her extended family, her sister spirits who traverse the shadowed byways of myth across different cultures? Next, we journey into the grim companionship of Lamia, Hecate, and the Sisterhood of Shadows. Lilith, though unique in her origin, is never truly alone in the tapestry of world mythology. Her archetype of the vengeful, child-stealing night hag, or the seductive, dangerous female spirit, finds powerful echoes in numerous other cultures. These figures form a formidable sisterhood of shadows, manifesting variations of the primal fear and fascination associated with untamed female power. One of the most prominent parallels is the Greek Lamia. Like Lilith, Lamia was a queen, cursed by Hera to steal and devour children after her own were killed by the jealous goddess. She became a monstrous, perpetually weeping creature, her beauty intertwined with horror, her sexuality a tool for predation. The shared theme of infanticide and insatiable hunger for revenge connects her deeply to Lilith's post-Edenic vows. Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic, witchcraft, and crossroads, also shares a spiritual kinship with Lilith. While not exclusively malevolent, Hecate commands dark magic, walks with spirits of the night, and presides over the liminal spaces between worlds. She embodies a potent, independent feminine power often feared and revered by ancient cults, much like Lilith's allure to practitioners of forbidden arts. Hecate's mastery of the unseen realms and her patronage of witches align perfectly with Lilith's own domain. Then there are the various succubi and lamashtu, the Persian Alp, and even some aspects of the Slavic Baba Yaga. All of these figures represent aspects of the dangerous feminine. The seductress, the child-eater, the untamed witch, the one who operates outside societal norms and expectations. These parallel figures confirm a universal human fascination and fear of female power untamed by patriarchal order. They are not merely evil, They are reflections of societal anxieties about female autonomy and destructive potential. But how did this fear manifest, leading to not just the silencing of her story, but its active suppression within dominant religious narratives? Next, we uncover the historical process of banishment and blame, how religions buried Lilith. The erasure of Lilith from mainstream Abrahamic narratives was not an accidental oversight. It was a deliberate act of theological and cultural suppression. As patriarchal religious structures solidified, demanding obedience and conformity, the independent and rebellious figure of Lilith became an inconvenient truth, a dangerous counter-narrative that undermined divine authority and the prescribed roles for women. Her story, rich with autonomy and defiance, directly challenged the desired image of Eve's subservience. The process of burial involved several strategies. First, her explicit narratives were relegated to the realm of folklore and mystical texts, particularly the Kabbalah, keeping them out of official scripture. This demotion allowed her to persist as a shadowy figure, yet stripped her of canonical authority. What was not included in sacred texts was implicitly deemed less important or worse, heretical. Second, her attributes were demonized. Her independence became wickedness, her refusal to submit became rebellion against God, and her procreative power outside of marriage was branded as demonic generation. This transformation from powerful, albeit flawed, woman to outright demon served to justify her ostracization and to instill fear into anyone contemplating similar acts of defiance. She was not just a figure of fear, she was a warning. Finally, blame was firmly placed upon her. She was not just the first to leave, but the one who chose evil, who initiated the corruption outside of Eden, thereby absolving Adam and Eve from some of the initial narrative responsibility for disobedience. Her existence explained away the dark corners of the world, making her a convenient scapegoat for human suffering and misfortune. This systematic burial of Lilith's story served to reinforce narratives of divine order, male supremacy, and female subordination, ensuring her legacy was one of fear and condemnation. But if her existence was so thoroughly condemned, how did communities actively combat her perceived threat? Next, we delve into the elaborate rituals and practices of the ritual war against Lilith. The fear Lilith inspired was not abstract. It manifested in concrete, ritualistic practices designed to ward off her malevolent influence. Across ancient Jewish communities, the threat of Lilith, particularly her perceived role in infant mortality, led to a pervasive ritual war against her. These practices were a blend of magical protection, prayer, and folk custom, reflecting a desperate need for control over unknown dangers. The most famous of these rituals involved amulets inscribed with the names of the three angels, Sen, Sansonoi, and Samangaloth, who were said to have pursued Lilith from Eden. These amulets were hung above the beds of newborn infants, particularly boys, during their most vulnerable period before circumcision, which was seen as a protective covenant. The belief was that the mere sight of these names would repel Lilith, forcing her to withdraw. Rituals also involved drawing a circle with chalk around the bed, or writing specific protective verses on the doors of the birthing chamber. Iron charms, which were believed to ward off evil spirits, were sometimes placed in the room. New mothers were often warned not to be left alone with their newborns, especially in darkness, as Lilith preferred moments of vulnerability and isolation for her predatory acts. These practices were not merely superstitions. They were potent expressions of collective anxiety and a community's desperate attempt to protect its most precious and fragile members. They highlight the tangible, lived impact of mythology, where stories like Lilith's influenced daily life and survival. The rituals served as a constant reminder of her presence, even as her story was officially suppressed. But if she was so effectively buried and demonized for centuries, what forces in modern times have compelled her re-emergence, transforming her from a figure of fear to one of empowerment? Next, we explore reclaiming the dark divine, Lilith in feminism and occultism. The modern re-emergence of Lilith from the shadows is a powerful testament to the enduring resonance of archetypal figures. Beginning in the 20th century, particularly within the feminist and occult movements, Lilith was not merely rediscovered, she was actively, deliberately reclaimed. Her story, once a cautionary tale of female defiance leading to demonic damnation, was reinterpreted as a radical narrative of freedom, autonomy, and irreducible self-worth. For feminists, Lilith became a potent symbol of liberation from patriarchal oppression. Her refusal to submit to Adam, her insistence on equality, and her choice of independence over subservience resonated deeply with the struggles for women's rights. She became the ultimate, first-wave feminist, long before the term existed, a figure who dared to challenge male supremacy at the very dawn of creation. Her banishment was recontextualized as a punishment for her strength, not her wickedness. Within occult and neo-pagan traditions, Lilith is celebrated as a dark goddess, a sovereign queen of shadows and forbidden knowledge. She is invoked not as a demon to be feared, but as a powerful deity representing untamed sexuality, fierce independence, primal wisdom, and the transformative power of the subconscious. She is seen as an embodiment of the wild, untamed feminine, a counterpoint to the more domesticated goddess figures. Her image on altars and in rituals speaks to a desire to connect with the primal, shadow aspects of divinity. This reclamation is not without controversy, challenging traditional religious interpretations and forcing a re-evaluation of what constitutes divine and demonic. It represents a powerful act of inversion, transforming a figure of fear into an icon of empowerment, a process that reflects a broader societal shift in how female power is perceived and valued. Make sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new mythology and folklore video. We'll see you in the next one.